There is a place on this planet where the entire economic machinery of the modern world passes through a gap barely wider than the distance between two suburban neighborhoods, 21 miles. That is the narrowest measurement of the Strait of Hormuz, the bottleneck between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, where, on any given day, between 15 and 20 fully loaded oil tankers pass through in each direction. Each of those tankers is carrying somewhere between 2 million and 3 million barrels of crude oil. Each barrel contains 42 gallons. The mathematics of what moves through that 21-mile gap on a single Tuesday afternoon, in a part of the world that most people could not locate precisely on a map, is almost impossible to hold in the mind at once. Roughly 1/5 of all the oil consumed on Earth passes through here, not 1/5 of some region's oil, 1/5 of the entire planet's daily consumption. The cars in Germany, the factories in South Korea, the power plants in Japan, the container ships crossing the Pacific. A significant portion of all of it is fueled by oil that came through this specific stretch of water, past the specific bottleneck. But here is what makes the Strait of Hormuz genuinely interesting. Separate from the economic numbers, the strait is not simply a modern phenomenon created by oil infrastructure. It is a place that has been important for 5,000 years, because the geography that makes it a choke point for oil tankers is the same geography that made it a choke point for ancient trading dhows carrying frankincense, copper, and pearls. The water doesn't know what it's carrying. It behaves the same way it has always behaved, with the specific tides, currents, and winds that the shape of the land produces. The cargoes have changed. The ships have grown from 40-foot wooden vessels to 400-meter steel ones. The geography has not changed at all. This is the story of that geography, what it is, how it formed, what has moved through it, and why 21 miles of water can matter this much. To understand the Strait of Hormuz, it helps to understand the Persian Gulf first, the body of water that the strait connects to the open ocean. The Persian Gulf is, in geological terms, a very young and very shallow sea. It sits in a tectonic depression between the Arabian Plate and the Eurasian Plate, and it is so shallow, averaging only about 50 meters in depth, with large portions less than 35 meters deep, that if sea levels were to drop by the amount they dropped during the last ice age, approximately 18,000 years ago, the entire Persian Gulf would become dry land. During the last glacial maximum, the area was a river valley, carrying fresh water from what are now the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, southward toward a coastline that sat near the current location of the Strait of Hormuz itself. When the ice melted and sea levels rose, roughly 14,000 years ago, the valley flooded. The Persian Gulf, as a body of water, is geologically a very recent creation. The Strait of Hormuz is where this shallow, warm, enclosed sea meets the deeper, cooler, more open water of the Gulf of Oman, which itself connects to the Arabian Sea and eventually to the Indian Ocean. The strait is the only natural outlet. There is no other connection between the Persian Gulf and the open ocean. Every ship that enters the Persian Gulf and every ship that leaves it must pass through this single channel. The channel's narrowest point, the 21 miles that gets cited in the statistics, is the gap between the Musandam Peninsula, a territory belonging to Oman that juts northward like a rocky fist, and the Iranian coastline on the opposite shore. But the full strait is wider than this minimum. It stretches roughly 90 miles in length from east to west, with widths that vary considerably along its length. The navigable deep-water channel, which is what actually matters for large ships, is narrower than the strait's total width suggests. Shallow banks and rocky outcroppings along both shores constrain the practical navigation area significantly. The internationally recognized shipping lanes, 2 lanes of 2 miles each with a separation zone, use only a portion of the strait's total width. The water itself is complicated. The Persian Gulf is hypersaline, significantly saltier than typical ocean water, because the high evaporation rates of the hot desert climate concentrate salts while the shallow depth and limited water exchange restricts dilution. At the strait, this dense, salty Persian Gulf water flows outward along the bottom, while cooler, less saline Gulf of Oman water flows inward along the surface, 2 currents moving in opposite directions in the same channel simultaneously. This is the physical environment. Now let's go back to the beginning, not to the oil era, but to the earliest human record of this water. The Strait of Hormuz sits at approximately 26 degrees north latitude and 56 degrees east longitude at the southeastern end of the Persian Gulf. The name Hormuz, or Ormuz as older European maps often spelled it, derives from Hormizd, a name with roots in the Zoroastrian tradition of ancient Persia, referring to the supreme deity Ahura Mazda. The name was applied to a trading city on the Iranian coast, and then to the island near that city, and eventually to the strait itself. The exact etymology has been debated by historians for centuries, but the Zoroastrian connection is the most widely accepted among scholars of the region. Physically, the strait is defined by two landmasses that reach toward each other without quite meeting. On the northern side is the Iranian coastline, a mountainous, arid shore where the Zagros mountain system descends toward the sea in steep ridges that leave almost no coastal plain. The mountains here are limestone, heavily eroded by millennia of rare but intense rainfall into a landscape of ridges and dry valleys that holds almost no permanent population. The coast is rocky, the anchorages are limited, and the mountains crowd close enough to the water that the visual impression from a ship approaching from the south is of a wall. On the southern side is the Musandam Peninsula, geographically part of the Arabian Peninsula, but separated from the bulk of the Arabian landmass by the Hajar Mountains. The Musandam is one of the most dramatic and least visited coastal landscapes in the world. It is a drowned mountain range, a series of peaks that were submerged by rising sea levels, leaving only their upper portions above water as fjord-like inlets called khors. These khors, steep-walled, narrow, deep, penetrate the mountains for miles in some cases, creating a coastline that is simultaneously extremely complex and extremely beautiful, and almost completely inaccessible from the land side. Between these two coastlines lies the strait itself. The depth profile of the strait is not uniform. The deepest water, reaching approximately 80 to 100 meters in places, runs through the center and toward the Gulf of Oman side. Near both shores, the depth decreases rapidly, with extensive shallow banks that make close-in navigation dangerous without precise chart knowledge. The tidal range in the strait is modest, typically between 1 and 2 meters, but the tidal currents are significant. Because the Persian Gulf is an enclosed basin, with a single opening, tides in the Gulf don't simply rise and fall in place. Water physically moves through the strait in large volumes as the tidal state changes, creating currents that can run at 2 to 3 knots through the channel. For modern motorized vessels, this is a manageable factor. For the sailing vessels that used this water for 4,000 years before engines existed, the tidal current through the Hormuz Narrows was a navigation challenge that required precise timing and local knowledge. The wind regime adds another layer of complexity. The dominant wind in the region is the shamal, a northwesterly wind that blows down the Persian Gulf from the northwest, typically strongest in winter and early summer. The shamal was the wind that traditional dhow sailors used for the outbound voyage from the Gulf, carrying their cargo of pearls, dates, and dried fish toward India. The return voyage, against the shamal, required different timing, different technique, and a detailed understanding of the seasonal shift to the southwest monsoon that made the return passage practical. The thermal environment of the strait is extreme by most navigational standards. Summer air temperatures along the shores routinely exceed 45 degrees Celsius. The water surface temperature in summer reaches 34 degrees, among the warmest ocean surface temperatures measured anywhere on Earth. The combination of heat, humidity, and the specific atmospheric conditions created by the enclosed Gulf produces navigational hazards, including sea fog, haze, and mirages that have confused sailors for centuries and continue to complicate navigation today. This is the physical place: the water, the shores, the currents, the wind. It has been here for 14,000 years. People have been using it for at least 5,000. The earliest material evidence of maritime trade through the Persian Gulf dates to approximately 5,000 years ago, during the period of the Sumerian civilization in what is now southern Iraq. Sumerian cuneiform tablets, some of the oldest written documents in existence, record trade voyages to places they called Dilmun, Magan, and Meluha. Dilmun is now understood to correspond to the area around Bahrain and the eastern Arabian coast. Magan corresponds to the Oman region, including the Musandam Peninsula and the approach to the Strait of Hormuz. Meluha is believed to correspond to the Indus Valley civilization in what is now Pakistan and northwestern India. The commodities moving through this trade network, documented in clay tablets baked in Mesopotamian fires 5 millennia ago, included copper from Oman, where significant copper deposits exist in the Hajar Mountains, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan moving westward through multiple intermediaries, carnelian beads, timber from the Indian subcontinent, and the specific commodity that would make the Persian Gulf's southern shores famous for thousands of years before oil: pearls. The pearl beds of the Persian Gulf, particularly around Bahrain and the Trucial Coast, the area now occupied by the United Arab Emirates, were among the most productive natural pearl fisheries in the ancient world. Persian Gulf pearls were traded to Egypt, to Mesopotamia, to the Mediterranean. Roman writers described them. Alexander the Great, who briefly controlled portions of the Gulf Coast after his conquest of Persia in 330 BCE, reportedly took particular interest in the pearl trade. The trade route that moved all of these commodities from India westward to Mesopotamia and from Mesopotamia eastward to India passed through the Strait of Hormuz in both directions. Every ship heading from the Indus Valley toward the mouth of the Euphrates passed through the strait. Every ship returning passed through it again. The trading city of Hormuz itself, the original city on the Iranian mainland near the modern port of Bandar Abbas, was already established as a significant commercial center by the time the First Islamic Caliphate expanded into the region in the 7th century CE. The city sat at the natural landfall point for ships approaching the strait from the Gulf of Oman, and it had developed the commercial infrastructure of a place that had been collecting tolls and providing services to passing traders for centuries before the Islamic period. By the 10th and 11th centuries CE, Arab geographers were documenting Hormuz as one of the most important trading ports in the Islamic world. Ibn Battuta, the Moroccan scholar and traveler who visited nearly every significant city of the 14th century Islamic world and left detailed descriptions of most of them, visited Hormuz and described it as a city of considerable wealth, with merchants dealing in goods from India, East Africa, China, and the Mediterranean simultaneously. The particular genius of Hormuz as a trading center was its location at the exact point where the monsoon wind systems of the Indian Ocean and the wind regime of the Persian Gulf intersected. Ships from India, riding the southwest monsoon, arrived at the Strait of Hormuz at the predictable time when the monsoon blew. Ships heading back to India waited for the same monsoon to return. The seasonal regularity of this wind system made the Indian Ocean trade routes, of which the Hormuz Passage was the western terminus, more predictable and therefore more reliable than overland routes subject to the political and physical disruptions of crossing multiple states and mountain ranges. In roughly 1300 CE, the trading city of Hormuz relocated from the mainland to a small island approximately 8 kilometers offshore. The reasons were primarily defensive. The island was easier to protect from raids, and the move did not interrupt the commercial function of the place at all. Hormuz Island, small and almost entirely without fresh water, nonetheless sustained a significant urban population for nearly 3 centuries, purely on the strength of its commercial position. The island had almost nothing: no agriculture, no permanent water supply, no natural resources of any kind. What it had was position, the right location at the right narrowing of water, and for 3 centuries that position was worth more than most nations' entire productive capacity. Then the Portuguese arrived, and everything about how this waterway was controlled changed permanently. In the early 1500s, Portuguese navigators were the most technically advanced maritime explorers on Earth. Vasco da Gama's 1498 voyage from Lisbon around the Cape of Good Hope to Calicut on the Indian coast had opened a direct sea route from Europe to the spice-producing regions of South and Southeast Asia, a route that bypassed the overland Silk Road and the Persian Gulf trading system entirely. Within a decade, the Portuguese crown had concluded that controlling the key nodes of the Indian Ocean trade network was more profitable than simply participating in it. The strategy was chokepoint control. Identify the narrows, the harbors, the passages that all trade had to move through, and build fortifications there. The spice trade from India to Europe could be taxed at its sources and along its routes. The Persian Gulf, as the western terminus of the Indian Ocean trade system, was one of those nodes. Afonso de Albuquerque, the Portuguese admiral and strategist who was the primary architect of the Indian Ocean Empire, understood this with the specific clarity of a man who had spent years studying where trade went and why. He identified Hormuz Island as the key to Persian Gulf access and led an expedition to seize it in 1507. The first Portuguese attempt failed. The island's rulers, supported by Persian allies, repelled the initial assault. Albuquerque returned in 1515 with a larger force and more artillery, and this time succeeded in establishing Portuguese control. He began construction of a fort on the island, the Forte de Nossa Senhora de Conceição, that would serve as the physical anchor of Portuguese control over the strait for the following century and a half. The fort that rose on Hormuz Island in the years after 1515 was built using the local materials available on an island with essentially no building stone of quality. The Portuguese engineers used the island's deposits of red ochre saltstone, a soft, easily carved material that was structurally inferior to proper limestone or granite, but was what existed. The fort's distinctive reddish-pink color, visible in historical illustrations and in the ruins that remain on the island today, came from this material. What the fort lacked in structural quality, it compensated for in artillery position. The guns mounted on the fort's bastions could cover the navigable channel through which all ships approaching the Gulf had to pass. A ship that attempted to enter or exit the Persian Gulf without Portuguese authorization could be engaged by cannon fire from the fort. The fort did not need to be architecturally magnificent. It needed to be able to sink wooden sailing vessels, and it could do that. The Portuguese maintained control of Hormuz for roughly 107 years. During this period, the island functioned as a toll station. Merchants who wanted to access the Persian Gulf market paid duties to the Portuguese, who extracted significant revenue from the trade flows they had positioned themselves to intercept. The Portuguese presence at Hormuz is historically significant not because it was particularly long-lasting. By the standards of empires, 107 years is a relatively brief tenure, but because it established the modern concept of strait control as a strategic military commercial objective. Before the Portuguese, the narrows at Hormuz had been a commercial advantage for whoever operated the city there. After Albuquerque, the strait became a military asset, a place where physical control of the water itself, enforced by cannon, could extract value from everyone who needed to pass. The Portuguese were expelled from Hormuz in 1622 by a combined force of Persian Shah Abbas I's army and ships of the British East India Company, who had their own commercial interests in accessing the Gulf trade without paying Portuguese tolls. The fort's ruins remain on Hormuz Island today. The reddish stone walls, worn by 5 centuries of Persian Gulf humidity and sun, are one of the most physically evocative remnants of the early modern era's scramble for oceanic trade control anywhere in the world. Visitors to the island, and it does receive visitors despite its remoteness, can walk the walls and look out through the same embrasures where Portuguese gunners once watched the shipping lanes. The view from those walls over the strait is largely unchanged from what those gunners saw. The water, the current, the specific quality of light on the Gulf of Oman in the afternoon, these do not change with the political arrangements on shore. Oil had been known in the Persian Gulf region long before anyone understood what it was or what to do with it. Natural oil seeps, places where petroleum percolates up through the ground from underground deposits and appears on the surface, exist throughout the region. Ancient peoples collected surface oil, called naphtha in the historical sources, and used it for waterproofing boats, for lamp fuel, occasionally as a weapon. The eternal fires of Baku, in what is now Azerbaijan, and the natural gas seeps of the Zoroastrian fire temples were phenomena well documented in ancient and medieval sources. The Greek historian Herodotus mentioned oil seeps near the Euphrates in the 5th century BCE. What nobody understood until the mid-19th century was the geological system that produced these seeps and the scale of what lay beneath the surface. The Persian Gulf Basin is one of the most productive hydrocarbon-generating geological environments on Earth, for reasons directly connected to its tectonic and biological history. The shallow, warm sea that covered the region repeatedly during the Mesozoic era, the age of dinosaurs, was extraordinarily productive biologically. Enormous quantities of marine organisms, algae, zooplankton, the organisms that built reef structures, lived and died in this environment over hundreds of millions of years. Their organic matter accumulated in the sediments of the seafloor, layer upon layer, eventually buried under thousands of meters of subsequent sediment. Under the heat and pressure of deep burial, organic matter transforms into hydrocarbons, the chemical process called catagenesis. The specific combination of source rocks rich in organic material, burial depth sufficient to generate hydrocarbons, and overlying rock structures capable of trapping the buoyant oil before it can escape to the surface, created in the Persian Gulf region some of the largest and most accessible oil reservoirs ever discovered. The first commercial oil discovery in the region was in Persia, modern Iran, at Masjid-i-Suleiman in 1908. This was the discovery that launched what would become the British Petroleum Company, initially called the Anglo-Persian Oil Company. The Masjid-i-Suleiman field in the Zagros foothills of southwestern Persia was the first indication of what the subsurface geology of the region contained. Over the following decades, discoveries followed across the Gulf's shores and in the waters beneath it. Kuwait in 1938, Saudi Arabia in 1938, Abu Dhabi in 1958, Qatar, Bahrain and other smaller fields throughout the mid-20th century. What the aggregate of these discoveries revealed was that the Persian Gulf Basin, the water and the land surrounding it, sits over what is, in terms of easily extractable conventional oil, the most concentrated petroleum reservoir system in the world. Approximately half of the world's proven conventional oil reserves are located in the countries bordering the Persian Gulf. This geological fact transformed the Strait of Hormuz from a historically significant trading passage into something with no historical precedent, a single physical location through which the energy supply of the industrialized world was required to move. The infrastructure that developed to move this oil was itself a feat of engineering that deserves its own examination. On any given day, the Strait of Hormuz contains more engineering complexity per square mile than almost any other stretch of water on the planet. The traffic management system begins before ships enter the strait itself. The International Maritime Organization, the United Nations agency responsible for shipping safety and environmental standards, established a traffic separation scheme for the Strait of Hormuz that divides the navigable channel into designated lanes. Inbound traffic, vessels entering the Persian Gulf, uses a lane on the Iranian side of the strait, roughly 2 miles wide. Outbound traffic uses a lane on the Omani side, also roughly 2 miles wide. Between the lanes is a separation zone approximately 2 miles wide. The lanes run at an angle across the strait, not straight east to west, because the alignment of the navigable deep water follows the natural depth contours of the seabed rather than a geometrically convenient direction. The vessels using these lanes range from small coastal cargo ships to the largest objects that float, the very large crude carriers, or VLCCs, that carry the bulk of the Gulf's oil export. A VLCC is approximately 330 meters long and 60 meters wide, with a fully loaded draft, the depth of the hull beneath the waterline, of around 22 meters. In the shallow waters of the Persian Gulf, where depths in many areas are less than 35 meters, a fully loaded VLCC operates with a keel clearance of the seabed that is measured in single-digit meters. The navigation of a fully loaded VLCC through the Strait of Hormuz requires, on the part of the vessel's officers, a level of precision that is difficult to communicate to someone unfamiliar with large ship handling. These ships do not steer the way a car steers. At full sea speed of approximately 15 knots, a VLCC requires several ship lengths of distance to execute a course change, and several miles to stop from full speed. In the confined waters of the strait, with other large vessels on defined opposing courses, the margin for error is small. Modern VLCCs are equipped with navigation technology that would have seemed miraculous to the mariners who first used these waters. Electronic chart systems displaying real-time vessel position, accurate to meters. Automatic identification system transponders broadcasting each ship's identity, course and speed to every other equipped vessel in the vicinity. Radar systems capable of tracking dozens of vessels simultaneously and projecting their future positions. VHF radio communication with traffic management centers ashore. The loading infrastructure that fills these vessels before they reach the strait is itself an enormous engineering enterprise. The loading terminals of the Persian Gulf, at Ras Tanura in Saudi Arabia, Karg Island in Iran, Jebel Dana in Abu Dhabi, and others, are among the most productive petroleum export facilities in the world. Ras Tanura alone has at various points in its history been the single largest oil export terminal on Earth, capable of loading multiple VLCCs simultaneously. A VLCC loading at Ras Tanura takes on cargo through submarine pipelines connected to offshore loading buoys. The ship moors to the buoy in open water, connects its cargo hoses, and pumps crude oil aboard at rates measured in tens of thousands of barrels per hour. A fully loaded VLCC carrying roughly 2 million barrels takes on that cargo in a matter of hours. The unloading process at the destination, in South Korea, Japan, China, India, or Western Europe, mirrors the loading process in reverse. The crude oil is pumped ashore to refinery tank farms, refined into gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, and the hundreds of other petroleum products that modern industrial economies require, and distributed through the transportation networks of the destination country. The entire chain, from wellhead in the Saudi desert to gasoline pump in Tokyo, is a logistics system of extraordinary complexity. The Strait of Hormuz is the geographical bottleneck through which the first, most critical stage of that chain must pass. The water through which these enormous ships move is not empty. Beneath the tanker keels, there is a biological and geological world that has been undisturbed since long before the first oil tanker was built. The Persian Gulf is not biologically a simple place. Despite its extreme conditions, shallow, hot, hypersaline, subjected to the environmental stress of being an enclosed sea with limited water exchange, the Gulf supports a marine ecosystem of considerable diversity and, in some areas, significant productivity. The hypersalinity that makes the Gulf's water inhospitable to some species creates conditions that specialist species have adapted to exploit. The Gulf is home to the second largest population of dugongs, large marine herbivores related to manatees, in the world after Australia. These animals, which can reach 3 meters in length and graze on the extensive seagrass beds of the Gulf's shallower regions, have been present in these waters for thousands of years. Ancient peoples of the Gulf Coast hunted them and depicted them in their art. The coral reefs of the Gulf are among the most thermally stressed coral communities in the world. Water temperatures that routinely reach 34 degrees Celsius in summer are beyond the thermal tolerance of most coral species elsewhere on the planet. The corals of the Gulf have adapted to these conditions over thousands of years of the Gulf's warm, enclosed existence, developing a degree of heat tolerance that researchers studying ocean warming and coral bleaching have found scientifically valuable. These corals can survive temperatures that instantly bleach corals from more temperate ocean regions. The seabed beneath the Strait of Hormuz itself reflects the geological complexity of the region. The strait sits at the junction of the Arabian Plate and the Eurasian Plate, the same tectonic collision that built the Zagros Mountains of Iran and the Hajar Mountains of Oman. The seabed in and around the strait is structurally complex, with fault lines, folded sedimentary layers, and the kind of geological architecture that in other parts of the region created the reservoir traps that hold oil. The strait's seafloor sediments carry a detailed record of the water's history. Sediment cores extracted from the Gulf bottom by oceanographic researchers contain layers that correspond to the flooding of the Gulf Basin at the end of the last ice age, to the historical salinity changes associated with periods of different climate, and to the biological productivity of different eras. Reading these sediment layers is, in a sense, reading the autobiography of the water itself. The bottom currents in the strait, the outflowing layer of dense, salty Persian Gulf water moving along the seabed toward the Gulf of Oman, carry with them the dissolved oxygen signature, temperature, and salinity of the Gulf's interior. These outflowing bottom waters mix with the Indian Ocean's deeper water masses and can be tracked by oceanographers far into the Arabian Sea, a traceable signal of the Gulf's specific water character, dispersing slowly into the broader ocean. The tidal movements that push water back and forth through the strait twice daily move not just seawater, but sediment, plankton, and the eggs and larvae of marine organisms. The strait is a biological corridor, as well as a commercial one, the pathway through which the open ocean constantly replenishes the enclosed Gulf's marine populations with new genetic material and new organisms, and through which the Gulf exports its own biological products to the broader ocean. Fish populations that spawn in the Gulf's shallow waters drift as larvae through the strait's currents into the Arabian Sea, dispersing to populations across the northern Indian Ocean. Arabian Sea species make the reverse journey, seeding the Gulf's fisheries. The ecological connectivity that the strait enables has been operating for as long as the Persian Gulf has existed as a body of water. 14,000 years of biological exchange through this same narrow passage. The land on both sides of the Strait of Hormuz is among the most arid and least modified landscape in the world. The Iranian shore, on the northern side, is defined by the coastal ranges of the Zagros system, mountains that run parallel to the Gulf Coast for most of the Gulf's length, leaving a narrow coastal plain in places and in other places, descending directly to the water. Near the strait, The Iranian coast is characterized by salt flats, mud flats, and the rocky debris of erosion from the mountains behind. The town of Bandar Abbas, the largest settlement on the Iranian side of the strait, sits on a sheltered bay approximately 30 kilometers west of the strait's narrowest point. It has been a port settlement since at least the Safavid period of Persian history in the 16th and 17th centuries. The name means Port of Abbas, referencing Shah Abbas I, who developed it as a commercial center after the expulsion of the Portuguese from Hormuz Island in 1622. Today it is a significant port city with a population of approximately 500,000 people, large by the standards of this coast, which is not naturally hospitable to dense settlement. The Iranian coastal hinterland near the strait receives less than 150 millimeters of rainfall per year, on average. Much of it receives far less. The vegetation is sparse: drought-adapted shrubs, succulents, the occasional acacia in dried riverbeds, and the landscape in the interior quickly becomes the stony desert that characterizes much of the Iranian plateau. The mountains that rise from the coast are almost entirely bare rock, their colors ranging from the pale limestone gray of the upper peaks to the red-brown of iron-rich sandstone lower down to the almost purple tones of certain mineral deposits. Hormuz Island itself sits approximately 8 kilometers from the Iranian mainland, visible from the coast on clear days as a low profile rising from the flat water. The island is approximately 42 square kilometers, small enough to walk across in a few hours. Its geology is exceptional and visually striking. The island is composed of a salt dome that has pushed up through the surrounding rock, bringing with it an extraordinary variety of minerals in a compressed area. The island's soils and rock faces display red, yellow, white, orange, and purple in close proximity, making it one of the most visually unusual landscapes in the Gulf region. Local tradition reportedly involves using the island's colored soils to flavor food. The red soil used in some preparations has an iron salt character that the fishing communities of the island historically incorporated into their diet. The island's current population is small, a few thousand people, primarily involved in fishing, and the modest tourism that has developed around its unusual geology and its Portuguese fort ruins. On the southern side of the strait, the Musandam Peninsula of Oman is as dramatic as any coastal landscape in Asia. The fjords, the cores that the submerged mountain peaks created, are steep-sided, quiet, and largely uninhabited. The predominant inhabitants of the Musandam are the Shihu people, a tribal group of uncertain origin who have lived in the peninsula's difficult terrain for centuries, developing a material culture precisely adapted to a landscape that offers little in the way of agricultural land or easily accessible water. The Shihu traditionally lived in stone houses built into the mountain slopes above the cores, descending to the water by paths known only to themselves, fishing the deep fjord waters, and supplementing their diet through small-scale herding of goats on the scrub vegetation of the higher slopes. Their dialect is distinct enough from Standard Arabic to be practically a separate language to outsiders. Their isolation, maintained for centuries by the physical inaccessibility of the Musandam terrain, produced a community that existed in almost complete independence from the political changes sweeping the surrounding region. The land frames the water, but the water is indifferent to it. 20%. That figure, 1/5 of all the oil the world consumes passing through 21 miles of water, requires some unpacking to understand what it actually represents in physical terms. World oil consumption in recent years has run at approximately 100 million barrels per day. 20% of that is 20 million barrels. A barrel of oil is 42 US gallons, or approximately 159 liters. 20 million barrels is therefore approximately 3.18 billion liters per day. To put that volume in physical terms, it would fill approximately 1,270 Olympic swimming pools every day, through a channel that, at its narrowest navigable point, is not much wider than a commercial airport runway is long. The tankers carrying this volume are, individually, among the largest moving objects ever constructed. A VLCC fully loaded with crude oil displaces more water than many naval warships combined. The fleet of tankers that moves Gulf oil on a daily basis represents a concentration of maritime transport capacity unmatched anywhere else in the world's oceans. The countries that depend most heavily on Gulf oil transported through the Strait of Hormuz are, in rough order of volume, China, India, Japan, South Korea, and Singapore, the major industrial economies of Asia. Together, Asian nations account for approximately 3/4 of all oil moving through the strait. The remainder goes primarily to Europe and to smaller volumes for various other destinations. Japan's situation illustrates the dependency most starkly. Japan has almost no domestic oil production. Its refineries and power plants and petrochemical industries depend on imported oil for virtually all of their petroleum requirement. Approximately 87% of Japan's oil imports have historically transited the Strait of Hormuz. For Japan, the strait is not an abstract economic concern. It is the specific piece of geography that determines whether Japanese industry continues to function. South Korea's situation is similar. South Korean steel mills, shipyards, semiconductor factories and automobile plants run on electricity and fuel that traces back in very large proportion to oil that moved through the Hormuz Channel. The depth of the economic integration between the Persian Gulf's oil fields and the industrial economies of East Asia, an integration built over roughly 70 years of petroleum development, is one of the most significant structural facts of the modern global economy. It was not designed by anyone. It emerged from the combination of where the oil happened to be geologically, where the demand for industrial energy happened to be economically, and where the geography required it to move. The Strait of Hormuz sits at the intersection of those three factors. The geology put the oil on one side of the strait, the economics created the demand on the other. The geography made the strait the required passage. The water doesn't know any of this. It moves with the tides and the shamal wind the same way it has moved for 14,000 years. The tankers crossing it now are enormously larger than the trading dhows that crossed it 2,000 years ago, but they are navigating the same currents, watching the same shores, passing through the same narrows that every ship using this water has always had to pass through. The strait is, in the end, a geological accident, a gap left by the specific way two tectonic plates met and the specific way sea levels rose after the last ice age. The fact that this geological accident happens to sit at the exit of the world's most oil-rich basin is not design, it is simply geography. Geography, it turns out, is enough. The Strait of Hormuz has been important for 5,000 years, and the reasons have changed completely while the place has stayed the same. To a Sumerian merchant in 2500 BCE, the strait was the passage through which copper from Oman and pearls from Bahrain moved towards Mesopotamian markets. The physical experience of that passage, the shamal wind, the tidal current through the narrows, the rocky Musandam shore on the south, and the Iranian mountains on the north, was the same physical experience that a VLCC navigator has today. To a Portuguese cannon crew in 1520, watching for unauthorized ships from the walls of the Hormuz Island fort, the strait was a toll gate, the place where the geography of the water created a choke point that could be taxed, controlled, defended. The logic of that control was not invented by the Portuguese. It had been understood by the rulers of the city of Hormuz for centuries before Albuquerque arrived. The Portuguese simply had better artillery than anyone who had previously attempted to formalize the arrangement. To a petroleum engineer in Tehran or a shipping dispatcher in Singapore, the strait is the world's most critical logistics constraint, the single physical location that no alternative route, no pipeline, no overland option has fully replaced as the pathway for Gulf oil to reach the ocean. What remains constant across all 5,000 years of this story is the geography itself. The 21-mile narrows between the Musandam Peninsula and the Iranian coast is not a human construction. It was not put there by anyone's decision or anyone's plan. It is the product of the same geological processes that built the Zagros Mountains and the Hajar Mountains and flooded the valley that became the Persian Gulf, forces operating on timescales so far beyond human history that the entire span of human civilization, from the first Sumerian trade voyage to the current VLCC transit, is a brief moment in the strait's existence. The deepest fact about the Strait of Hormuz is this: the water does not care what it carries. It carried frankincense from Arabia, and cotton from India, and pearls from Bahrain for 4,000 years before anyone had ever heard the word petroleum. It carries oil today because the geology of the basin on one side of it produced petroleum in quantities that the industrial economies on the other side of the world require. If those economies shift to different energy sources, as they eventually will, as every energy system in history has eventually been replaced by the next one, the water will continue to move through the narrows exactly as it does now. The shamal will blow. The tide will run. The dense hypersaline bottom water of the Persian Gulf will flow outward along the seabed into the Gulf of Oman. The coral reefs of the Musandam will continue their thermally adapted existence. The dugongs will graze the seagrass beds in the warm shallows. The strait will still be there. Geography is patient. If you made it to the end of this one, drop A in the comments. Pure geography, pure history. No noise, and I want to know who watches these all the way through. If this is your first video here, welcome. This channel does deep dive documentary format on the places, systems, and stories that actually shape how the world works. The physical geography, the historical layers, the engineering underneath everything. No headlines, no hot takes, just the full picture. Subscribe if that's what you're looking for. Next episode, we're going to the other end of the world's most important shipping route, the Strait of Malacca, the 550-mile channel between Malaysia and Indonesia, through which roughly 40% of global trade passes. Different geography, different history, same fundamental story. A narrow place that matters enormously because of exactly what it is and exactly where it sits. There's also a video already up on the Panama Canal, the 51-mile cut through the Central American Isthmus that took 35 years and 2 countries to build, linked below if you want to stay in the chokepoint geography space. Thank you for watching. See you next week.